Welcome to this week's episode. Today we are talking about ABCI's origin story. Why aviation marketing, of all the crazy things, right? So I'm Paula Williams.
I'm John Williams.
And we are ABCI, and ABCI's mission is...
to help all you ladies and gentlemen out there in the aviation world sell more products and services.
Absolutely. All right, so today we're going to talk about why aviation, of all the crazy things that we could be doing. Why marketing, of all the crazy things we could be doing.
Well, nobody would be willing to follow us in here.
Exactly. Our crash and burn story. I think every great company has a crash and burn story, at least one, right? And our mission, and why it's important. We talk about that at the beginning of every episode, just about, I'm Paula Williams and he's John Williams and this is our mission. But we've never gone into the detail of why we care about that sort of thing and why you should too, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so this episode has been brought to you by our Aviation Marketing Lab. And the Marketing Lab includes all of the bits and pieces and software and services that we think a company needs to get off to the best possible start when they start deciding that they really need to improve their marketing results. So we distilled that down to the best deal we could possibly make, and John and I have gone back and forth on this many times, making this better and better and better and getting the cost down further and further by using our economies of scale and other things to make this affordable for aviation companies and marketing professionals, right?
Right, but you failed to say one more thing that's added in there.
What's that?
Our analysis.
Yeah, that's true. Exactly. So we do a monthly analysis, or actually we do office hours with you each month.
That's right.
To figure out how to best apply all of this stuff, because you can have all the software in the world, and a lot of people do spend a ton of money on software, and they have no idea. Maybe they're using 10% of the software that they're using. They don't really know how to make it solve their problems or even answer their questions in ways that make sense or that are really valuable. So we've got this down to a $279 monthly charge for a company to really start getting some great results from their marketing. All right. This month, if you join us before the end of April, we're also offering our personal branding package, which is a $979 value, which is a really good time to be doing this if you're going to be going to these networking events. People are going to be looking you up on LinkedIn before they meet you, right?
It's been happened to me.
On more than one occasion.
Yes, exactly.
They know who you are because they've seen you, right? On
you
LinkedIn.
walk into a room you don't know, and the guy comes over and says, "Hi, I'm." I said, "Yes, you are," because I did it to him too.
Because you looked him up too. And so that's often people's first impression is how you look online. So we want to make sure that we're taking a look at that, going through it with our checklists. Aviation people love checklists, and making sure that every way that you could possibly optimize that and make it better, we're doing that. Okay, so why aviation? This is your aviation story, right? That's
like
a
airplanes.
DC-3, right?
Oh, yeah. That's a DC-3, yeah.
Your first flight.
Oh, you want me to talk about that?
Right, this is an origin story, right?
Yeah, but this was way before the origin.
Way before, well, yeah, but why aviation? Why are we interested in aviation?
Well, a long time ago.
In a galaxy far, far away.
Frontier put in a new service to a little town in Montana, where I was living with my parents.
This is not a Frontier Airlines DC-3, but I couldn't find a picture that was perfect. So. Also could not find one in Glendive, Montana, flying over the cornfields, but...
Anyway.
Yeah.
So they had $1 day. My dad took me out. For $1, we'd go for a ride. So my dad spent $2. Now we took off this airplane, and then we were up cruising around the skies over Montana, and the stewardess, which is what they were called back then, came up to me and says, "So, what do you think about this big old airplane?" Big, right? DC-3. And I said I didn't like it. She just about fell over. She said, "Why?" I said, "Because I want to see what the captain's doing." So she went up and talked to him, came back, took me up there. There weren't any doors then, not even doors to lock. Right. So he walked up there and he looked at me and said, "You want to fly this thing?" I said, "Sure." So he sat me down in his lap and he he showed me the controls, what each one of them did, and so then he gave them to me. And I tooled around the skies of Montana for about 10, 15 minutes.
In a plane full of passengers.
You know, he told me, you know, and I watched when he turned left, and he would go down there and he would
hit the trim
tab manually.
Right.
So I did that, and I went back to right, did that, did a circle, and he just roared. He said to his co-pilot, he said, "This guy's going to make a pilot one day."
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I mean, nobody can do that these days.
Right.
You can't even do that in private airplanes, just about.
Right.
So it was just, that was my first flight. I was 9 years old.
And since then, you've done a lot of flying.
Yep.
In a lot of different things.
I got my son to fly his first lesson when he was 5.
Cool.
I gave it to him. But anyway, these kinds of things that got people turned on to aviation back then don't work anymore.
Right. But you were ruined for a desk job.
Yeah, well, it got worse because once I got in the military and started flying helicopters and saving lives, you know, and I mean, in the unit I was flying in the Air Force, I think the average save per pilot when I left was around 10 or 11. And once you've done that, then desk jobs just don't work.
Corporate America is not as much fun.
No, I mean, you know, I took a desk job and I did some stuff, but I couldn't just sit there. I had to get up and roam around every 20 minutes or so.
Right, exactly. And you always wanted to get back into
yes.
aviation in some way, right? That makes sense. And then, 2006.
Yeah, you and I got married then.
Right. And a lot of the things, you know, that come with getting to know someone, you get to know the things that are important to them. I had never had an interest really in aviation. I always loved traveling, but I didn't much care how I got there. I might as well take a transporter, but, you know, I enjoyed flying.
And for those of you that understand military, yes, I'm in an Army uniform, and that's because after 10 years in the Air Force, I got out for a short period and I got back into the Army Reserves.
Exactly. So Army and Air Force, but this is actually a really nice uniform. I like this one. So that worked out really well. But when you marry an aviation guy, certain concessions have to be made, right? And then I found out I liked it. So, you know, John, one of his dreams really was to buy an airplane. And we went to the factory. He went to the factory and picked this up. I was working a corporate job and couldn't make it all the way to the factory, but he picked me up
in Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City, right? And we flew Charlie back to Salt Lake City, which is where I learned how to fly. And I learned in 2006, so it was a completely different scenario when I learned to fly versus when John learned to fly. So, you know, I was learning to fly in Bravo Airspace with all the checklists and all the regulations and all of the bookwork that you have to do before you ever get in the airplane. And so it was a different...
told her stories about when I was learning and down in New Orleans area.
Yeah.
Right? I'd go rent an airplane for $5 an hour after I soloed.
Right.
And that's wet. I'd fly down the beach and see if I see a couple of girls and a ice chest.
Cooler, right?
Right. So I'd land and taxi up, shut it down, get out and go talk to them. I could usually always get a drink. I was trying for phone numbers. It didn't always work.
Don't try this at home, right?
No, I mean, nowadays, holy cow.
Not the best way to meet girls. So we met at work, actually. So that was a different story.
But that's not... You can't do that these days. You just can't go land on beaches.
Right.
Typically without somebody getting all upset.
Exactly. Right. So why marketing? This is how I started out. In a pretty traditional...
So you're the girl sitting over there on the right.
No, this is Mad Men. This is from the TV show.
But that would be you.
Anyway, the marketing in a big company, and I worked in a lot of big companies, Wells Fargo being probably the first and the longest of them, where money is not the concern. The concern is consistency, the concern is quality, the concern is a lot of different things, and we had almost unlimited budgets and almost unlimited resources and almost unlimited technology, and we had access to the Gartner Group reports and the best software of the day, such that it was, and consultants and all kinds of fabulous things. So I learned marketing in an environment where it's the most like the kind of marketing that you learn in school, where you have a several $1 million budget and you have you try to do market penetration and those kinds of things. Most aviation companies are not there. They don't have those kinds of budgets and they don't have those kinds of circumstances.
At least not for marketing budget.
Exactly. And then even at some of these big companies that I was working at the time, and that you were also working at the time, the internet came along, and you see this and you almost hear that modem noise, right?
Yep.
The early days of the internet, and some of the things that we did to start with. We were doing marketing for CTG. Actually, you wrote CTG's first website, right?
Yes, by hand.
In HTML, right?
In HTML.
Oh my gosh. So, and these are big companies, and there was not the software that they have now, right?
Yep.
And then, of course, I was working at Wells Fargo. I also worked at Pearson for quite some time doing marketing and product marketing, and Franklin Covey. And all of these companies were interested in using technology, but they were also very, very traditional companies that wouldn't let us do anything fun or experimental or anything, right?
Right.
So on the side, we started indulging our creative wheels or whatever in extracurricular activities, like with Oldies 94.1. Dickie and Angel Shannon were some of our favorite people. They're actually still friends of ours, and they're really fun people. And they wanted to do a trivia quiz on their website, and nobody knew how to do it. So they hired us. We were doing it in handwritten JavaScript, right? Well, handwritten meaning Notepad, JavaScript,
right,
and other things. And it took us forever every week to...
Yeah, we did this every week.
Yeah, to find the songs and the questions and the things that they wanted to ask about, and the right answers and the wrong answers, and code that all by hand, and then you'd debug it and you'd find an error and you'd have to go back and start over. It was not like it is now, right?
No.
Okay. And also, one of your relatives had an advertising novelties company where there were thousands and thousands of pens.
Oh, and all kinds of advertising novelties.
Advertising novelties, exactly. And so we did a pen catalog on the web as one of our very first projects, using pretty much hand-coded technology, right? We had it going to a database, but it was all hand-coded connections, and it was a nightmare, right?
Yes.
We are so happy that technology progressed to what it is now. Unfortunately, corporate culture also progressed to what it is now, and how people used to be loyal to companies and companies used to be loyal to people. One of the things that we noticed in all of these mergers and acquisitions and crazy things that were going on was that we didn't have a lot of control over what was happening in our lives, right? And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail other than that I had a difference of opinion about how much vacation I should be taking with one of the companies. In fact, this was one of our biggest disputes, probably the last one, was that I had requested the time off to go with you to pick up the
airplane,
the 172 at the Cessna factory. We had the time scheduled. I gave them two alternatives, asked my boss to pick one or the other. She picked the later date, so we had the later date on the calendar, and
got that point.
Got close.
They wouldn't let her go.
They said, "You can't go. We need you. We've got things going on." And I'm like, "I had this on the calendar for years. Well, months anyway." And so I ended up taking part of the time and splitting the difference with them, and it was just really unsatisfying for them and really unsatisfying for me. And corporate life was just, we were both ruined for day jobs. We'll just put it that way, right? Okay. So we had a great but imperfect idea. We were going to sell copywriting to aviation companies. We didn't have to buy any software. Everybody would love it. We have all these skills from working for all these big companies, and aviation companies need this, and look how bad their websites are. We'll just call them and tell them how bad their website is, and they'll just fall all over themselves trying to hire us, right? That was our initial marketing plan. just point out the needs, not necessarily the perceived needs, but the needs that we saw, and assume that they were going to be savvy enough to realize the value that we were offering them. They didn't. So we had to revise our plan and start offering more and wider variety of marketing services. Right. And we had to invest in some software and change our company to what aviation companies actually wanted and needed, which was a little bit more of a complete marketing solution, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And we got some great clients. Some of our first clients are still with us. Love them. Love working with them. Really enjoy this 1,000 times more than the Dilbert Cube, and things like that. But it wasn't all sunshine and roses. We did have one client, not every single person in the aviation industry is totally in agreement with everything that we say and do. And, there was one company that we had they wanted us to do some work, which was great. We came to an agreement about some work that needed to be done. We had a scope, we had a written scope of what we were going to do for them. And as it turned out, they wanted more than what was in the written scope, and they had understood it to be something different than we had understood it to be. They were more than 50% of our monthly revenue. And they were unhappy and we were unhappy. And it came to a head when they actually confiscated some gear from one of our photographers who was working on site with them, locked it up in a room and said, you can have this back when we get this resolved. And so we ended up driving overnight to get there to his office the next day. And he wasn't even there. That was the really crazy thing. So we ended up working with one of his managers, and he got him on the phone, and we had this conversation. And, of course, we guarantee satisfaction. So even though what he wanted was not in the scope of what we had agreed to, we gave him his money back, and it was a ton of money. And we were out a lot of people that we'd hired and equipment that we'd bought and other kinds of things to make this work for this client, right?
Yeah, but it was kind of like in a movie. We said, and they said, when we get the money, then we'll get them. I said, no.
You get the equipment back, right?
So I got the computer out the laptop, signed on to my bank, our bank, and said, so you see that this is the amount we agreed on. He said, yes. I typed it in there, and I hit the button, and it said, it's going to you. You gave us he gave us the account number and so forth. And he said, okay. There
it is. And he unlocked the equipment, and it was a set of lights and some other stuff that our photographer
put it in the car.
Put it in the car and drove away. And so our photographer got his stuff back. We were out a ton of money. Everybody got paid other than us. So we did manage to do that because John's a financial genius. Otherwise, we never would have survived that crash and burn. And we decided that we were never going to have another client that was in a position to put us out of business again, right?
Nope, absolutely.
Right. So a full pipeline is the key to independence and happiness. That is what we learned, right?
Yes.
And so what we want for ourselves and for all of our clients is the freedom to refuse any particular project or client for any reason. And the way that you do that is by having a full pipeline, being able to say no. And we also want everyone to have, including ourselves, the prosperity to treat their clients, their team, and their family very, very well. So those are the two things that we want, and that's what really leads to our mission, which is to help aviation companies sell more of their products and services, because once again, a full pipeline is the key to independence and therefore happiness, right?
Of course.
Okay. All right. So thank you for letting us share our story with you. We think it's important for people to know where we're coming from, and we think it's important for our clients to tell their stories as well, because that really shows what they're like to work with, why they do what they do, and all of that is really important, right? Okay, so this episode, as have several of the past few, been brought to you by the Aviation Marketing Lab. And once again, this is our way of making it super affordable to accomplish our mission, with even the smallest aviation companies or aviation sales and marketing professionals who need to have that full pipeline so that they are never the guy on the curb with the box of their stuff because they disagreed with their boss, right?
Yep.
A full pipeline is really what we're after here, and this is the most efficient way that we found to make that happen.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we'd love to hear your origin story. How did you get where you are with your company? And we'd love to see that in the comments, or we'd love to have you share that with us. You can click this button right here, contact us, and we'd love to hear how we can help with your story, help you improve it, and help you get a full pipeline of customers so that you can have the same independence and happiness. Not perfect happiness, but mostly happiness that we have found with a full pipeline.
Yep.
So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.